Yeah. After the class that she had been taking talking about back then.
And it was just like, yeah, we actually
He's coming.
I'm really interested if you get anything from our mid-rocket class of this book.
Well, okay, so it's interesting because I read the names and I was like, and so I immediately was thinking, and yes, I'm going to.
Nobody wants to talk on that plane, but I can talk about it with
Good evening. I'm Claire, and on behalf of Harvard Bookstore, thank you for joining us tonight for our event with Jeanne Blasberg, who's here to discuss her debut novel, Eden. Before we get started, however, I'd like to let you know about a few of our upcoming events. Tomorrow, we're hosting an afternoon with Granta Magazine featuring their Best of the Young American Novelists at the Cambridge Public Library. We'll be joined by Mark Doughton, Rachel Glazer, Greg Jackson, and Santa Krasikoff. And please note that that event has been moved to 2:30 p.m. Then on Tuesday, June 6th, we'll be joined by Margot Singer, who will be in conversation with William Pierce to discuss her new novel, Underground Fugue. That event begins at 7 p.m. right here at the bookstore. We've got some great ticketed events for June too, including Roxanne Gay on June 14th, Jonathan Safran Foer on June 15th, Neil Stevenson and Nicole Gland on June 19th, and Arundhati Roy on June 20th. You can learn more about all of these events and everything we have upcoming on our website, which is harvard.com/events, or on these multicolored flyers, depending on the month, right here. Tonight's event is part of Harvard Bookstore's new Voices in Fiction series, presented with Grub Street, highlighting debut novelists discussing their work and the writing process. It's also being streamed on Facebook Live on Jeanne's page, so please be aware that during the Q&A, your questions, your voice might be recorded. After today's talk, we'll have time for questions from the audience, and following that, we'll have a book signing right here at this table. Eden is available for sale at the registers in the next room, and for tonight only, it's 20% off. As part of how we say thank you for buying your books at Harvard Bookstore. Your purchases support the future of the bookstore and make it possible for us to host events like tonight, so thank you. I'd also like to thank you in advance and gently remind you to turn off or at least silence your cell phones for the duration of today's talk, especially if it's being recorded. You don't want to be recorded in posterity as the person with their phone going off. Your neighbors will thank you too. And now I am pleased to introduce Jeanne. She joins us tonight from just over the river, but her path to the author's podium has been anything but ordinary. She began her career on Wall Street, eventually ending up at Harvard Business School as a research associate. But a career and a calling are two entirely different matters, and she enrolled at Grub Street to pursue her passion for writing. There, she studied both memoir and fiction, and Eden was born. The family summer home, whether it's a cottage in Mount Desert or an actual cottage by the beach, can often be a powerful setting for a novel, a place that is more than a place. It's a repository for family history, long-buried memories, and nostalgia for a time beyond our own. For outsiders and insiders alike, it can be a kind of Eden. This is especially true for Becca Fitzpatrick and her family in Jeanne's debut novel, Eden. Set over a single 4th of July weekend, is there a more archetypal summer weekend, summer holiday? It traces the impact of the Meister summer home, Eden, on the lives of the women in the family. Secrets and struggles, despair, and even some joy. Kirkus Review calls it an engrossing, character-driven family saga, and notes that Blasberg's evocative prose captures the place and atmosphere. We are so very pleased to have Jeanne here with us tonight, so please join me in welcoming her to Harvard Bookstore.
Wow, thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, Claire. And thank you to Harvard Bookstore and to Jeff Meyerson. Oh, there you are. And to Bethy, who I know is not here, and Sierra, all of you in the events department who have helped me, this debut author, get to this place. Everything I'm doing at this point is brand new, so thank you very much. I have to thank a few other people, so bear with me. There are a couple of women here who read this manuscript from its earliest stage, and I'm almost embarrassed to say how long ago that was, but it was maybe a decade ago, and that's Deb and Betty here in the second row. They're in the acknowledgments too. So my original Cambridge writing group, I really appreciate it. And then my new writing family from Grub Street is also heavily represented here. So I have to thank Grub Street and all of the support. And you're too numerous to name in the audience. I see people from my novel generator class, and it means more than you can even imagine that you're here tonight. I also have to thank my family. My wonderful husband John is here, and my father-in-law Arthur, and my children, of which one is here today. The other two are off adulting, as they say, and in different places, and they will hit this book tour somewhere along the line. But a book takes a really long time to give birth to, and it takes a lot of help and a lot of encouragement and guidance. So I just want to say thank you to everyone for coming tonight for my debut event, and also for everything you've done up to now to get me standing at this microphone. Claire's introduction was perfect, and Eden really is about this home, this summer home, and Eden is a character. The summer home is a character in the book. It's this big rambling home where generations of a family come for about 80 years. It's built by a man named Bunny Meister, and Bunny was born Bernard Meister in Pittsburgh in the early 1900s to Jewish German immigrants, and he's a real rags to riches story. He'd never seen the Atlantic Ocean, only dreamt of it, and it's really his hard work and his gained wealth that builds this house and creates the opportunity for his family. He really marries up. He aspires to be, in a society, in a world that's much different than the one he was born into. And he marries Sadie Thompson, who's from the patrician class in Pittsburgh, a family that's made a lot of money in the coal industry. And he builds this house, and Sadie's not really involved. And the first bit I want to read for you is the time when Bunny first brings his family to Long Harbor, Rhode Island, which is the fictional name of a town, and first arrives at Eden. So, let me just take a sip of water, actually. Bunny's hands trembled with excitement on a sunny June morning in 1925. He folded the road maps and fidgeted with the luggage. His shiny black Nash 168 was packed and ready to pull out of the driveway once the goodbyes were over. He ushered Sadie, Thomas, Edward, and Robert through the drawn-out exchange of hugs and good wishes with Kitty and his parents. Sadie wept as she hugged her sister, but Bunny finally pried them apart and guided his wife into the passenger seat. Sadie's expression was still full of uncertainty. Nevertheless, Bunny drove away, his boy's arms waving out the back windows. He smiled in the rearview mirror, catching a glimpse of his mother dabbing her eyes with a handkerchief. They made stops along the way at small roadside hotels. On the third day, dusty and weary, Bunny's heart began to race as they got closer to Long Harbor. He was panicked that Sadie would never be happy and that this house might not measure up to her refined tastes. He now wished he'd insisted she review the plans with him. He paused and took a deep breath before making the turn up the driveway. When the structure finally came into view, he heard her gasp and saw her press her hands to her cheeks. The home's 3 stories anchored it in the middle, and its 2 double-storied wings stretched out like arms on either side. Void of landscaping, with nothing but ocean on the flat horizon beyond, the magnificent house appeared even more colossal. Bunny tooted the horn ceremoniously as the family burst from the car. Sadie and the kids ran to the height of the dunes, eager to see the famous Atlantic Ocean. But Bunny emerged from the car slowly, wanting their first moments in this new, bright world to unfold in slow motion. "It smells sort of salty and sweet at the same time," Sadie said. Unable to find the right words, Bunny grabbed her around the middle and twirled her in the air. "Oh, Bunny, look what you've done," she said, giggling. Bunny kissed her delicate lips. He continued to hold Sadie up in the air, then swung her legs over one arm and carried her through the front door. They stood quietly on the landing, admiring the sparsely furnished living room with a coffered ceiling and large stone fireplace. The ocean beyond the living room and back porch was framed by a wide expanse of windows that at first could be mistaken for a painting rather than the actual sea. So, as I mentioned, Bunny really creates all the wealth to build Eden. But it's the women, it's Sadie and her daughter and grandchildren that really habitate the house with life and make Eden a home. The book follows 4 generations of women, and the chapters alternate past and present so that the reader actually knows more about the character's background and the family history than the characters know of their themselves sometimes. And this creates something called dramatic irony. It's when you know more about the characters than they know themselves. So one person who really doesn't understand much about the history of her family except for her own perceptions is Rachel. And the reading I just did was back in 1925. Now we're going to go to the year 2000, leading up to this 4th of July weekend, and where we're introduced to Rachel for the first time. Rachel retreated to her bedroom often. Inside its octagonal walls, she could ignore the unthinkable. Sarah, foolish Sarah, falling in love with an older man and showing up here pregnant, so naive about what it meant, what sacrifices she would have to make. Rachel closed the door and tried to forget, diving under her covers and swimming in the vastness of the queen-size mattress, so high off the ground. The tightly woven green carpet and antique dressing table in this room had been thoughtfully chosen years ago by her grandmother, who had decorated it for her mother, the only daughter in a family of rowdy boys. Even though Sadie might have overdone it with a frilled canopy over the bed, Rachel adored the room and its outspoken femininity. Rachel liked to sleep with the windows opened wide, welcoming in the cool nighttime air. The sea breeze wafted through the sheer curtains like a breath of life, CPR for her soul. She resisted ever closing them, even when, at the first hint of rain, Lily bustled through the house, slamming every window shut. When Rachel was a teenager, her mother would burst into her bedroom at 10 o'clock most mornings with an air of disgust, exclaiming that she was sleeping her summer away. She had been especially outraged those summers her cousins Joseph and Benjamin visited, as she had counted on Rachel to entertain them while her brother was off at the tennis courts. "They're perfectly content going to the beach themselves, Mother." "It's just that it's rude, Rachel. I promised Ruth we'd show them a good time." Her mother had always been a self-proclaimed morning person, righteously measuring people's worth by what time they got out of bed. Rachel, on the other hand, slept late, and the rituals she treasured most had to do with bedtime. Fluffing up pillows, sipping a little wine, and reading a few lines of a book before giving in to heavy eyelids and full-consuming sleep. Even better was the true summer luxury of waking up naturally, without an alarm. Rachel could lie still as her eyes adjusted to the light, reveling in the warmth of the down quilt, and listen for the sounds of the house. Water surging through the pipes meant her mother was showering. The kitchen door slamming was her daughter, Sarah. The crunch of the Lincoln's tires in the gravel driveway meant Lily was off to the market. Rachel stretched her arms above her head and inhaled deeply, in search of breakfast in the air, but then remembered that since her father's death the previous winter, no one ate bacon anymore. Okay, so that's Rachel. So I mentioned that the book really is about the generations of women in the family, but there's one woman in particular whose story is most prominent in Eden, and that's Becca. Becca was Bunny's youngest child and Rachel's mother. So Becca is the grandmother when this book first opens, when the story opens. And because, as I mentioned, the chapters weave present and past, she's the one character we see from birth to old age. So I just need to do one more reading here, and I want to read something about Becca. And I'm going to read from the beginning, one of the first times we meet Becca, for two reasons. No spoilers tonight. You have to read to kind of find out all the juicy stuff yourselves. And second, Betty and Deb, you've probably heard this chapter from a very early stage, and I think it's really fun that I'm reading it tonight. It's one of the only things that made it through this manuscript from the beginning to the end in all of its years and years of revision. So this is Long Harbor, Rhode Island, Friday, June 26th, 2000. Becca's nostrils flared as she inhaled the briny air. Yeah, that's what I'm going to do. Becca's nostrils flared as she inhaled the briny air, elongating her stride and pumping her arms. She was already perspiring, typical. Last week she had considered lighting a fire in the study, and today was hazy, hot, and humid, the beginning of a heat wave. They were saying record temperatures straight on through the holiday weekend. Becca had walked the same crescent beach 1 mile out and 1 mile back most summer mornings for the past 50 years. She used to have the beach all to herself, had started back before it was in vogue to wear tight black pants and earphones. Some mornings the tide was high, leaving only a sliver of seaweed-coated sand for her to struggle through. Other mornings, like this one, it was delightfully low, exposing a broad and glassy hard-packed surface that her aged legs glided over briskly. Although the beach's contours changed from day to day, and winter storms often eroded the sand dramatically, the man-made landmarks beyond the dunes remained as familiar to her as the rooms of Eden. Her Springer Spaniel, Hennessy, preferred nosing around the driftwood up by the dunes, to her full steam ahead approach. He yanked on the leash, almost pulling her over. Becca relented and unclipped him, even though the week before he had bounded through the protective fencing around the piping plover's nesting grounds. An irate park ranger had yelled at Becca for several humiliating minutes while she struggled to get the dog under control. Dan had never hidden his irritation at the expansive sanctuary claimed for the plovers, saying, "If those damn birds are ever going to survive in the wild, they shouldn't be coddled." Becca tried to supplant that memory and her creeping melancholy with some enthusiasm for the upcoming season. Summer had always been her favorite. Over her life, she had come to appreciate its unique cycle. During the cooler weeks, just after Memorial Day, people were scarce. The weather was damp with spray to be washed off the windows. In July, houses filled, the sun heated up, and tides rose. By August, Long Harbor was in full swing. Insects buzzed in the garden, and tomatoes ripened on the vine. As September approached, the tide slowly ebbed. Hostesses grew weary of houseguests. Parents happily delivered their children back to school, and one could pull the blankets back over the sheets. So, give you a